let me welcome you to our next talk in Slevarna. And I'm really happy that I can introduce our next speaker, Max Hillebrand. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Okay, great. And I'm really glad that I can introduce Max here because Max is my good friend. We met on hackathon in Bratislava. It was Bitcoin hackathon in Paralelnápolis, and Max is such a cool guy. He found a way how to use Bitcoin in such a private way that it's even more private than Monero. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So Max is contributor to many open source projects, but what is most important, Wasabi Wallet. So who used Wasabi Wallet here? Oh, I love you guys. And who didn't raise the hand is doing a huge mistake. And I think Max will explain why. So let me hand over to our next speaker, Max, and have fun.
Thank you very much. No, I got that one.
Oh, you got it? Yeah, sorry.
What's up, peers? Thank you very much for joining me here today. It really is a great honor to speak here. Last year was my first year at HCPP, and Liberate was a perfect topic because what happened in between that and the mindset shift that you get after attending such a great event is truly absolutely liberating. And the topic this year with opt-out seems to be even more fitting for me because with the user-activated soft fork and especially No2X, it became clear to me that Bitcoin is the real thing. This is a powerful tool to defend your individual sovereignty and to reclaim your monetary independence. And that is so unbelievable, not just in order to defend against malicious actors trying to take over, but even when you're acting in accordance to consensus, to then get the upgrades that you want into the protocol. So UASF and No2X was this 1-2 punch that really proved to me that Bitcoin is a tool that we can use to opt out. And pretty much a day after, I decided to sell all my fiat bags. And it took me quite a bit to reach that state where I'm right now. But a couple days ago, I quit my bank account. I'm completely unbanked now. I live only with Bitcoin and with cash. Thank you very much. And you know, it's not just that you have Bitcoin, that you hold it, but even more important is that you contribute to this open source ecosystem. And so when you are at that point where you can actually earn Satoshis by providing a valuable service to other peers in your network, in your local Agora, that is absolutely powerful. And then especially when you use these earned Satoshis and you spend them again on the goods and services that you would like to consume or that you need in order to produce something for your clients. So we are at this point where we truly have this opportunity to opt out, to be unbanked and to say fuck you to the fiat system of slavery and to live in a voluntary agora. And I think here at Paralelnápolis, with this permanent autonomous zone, we have a beacon of hope here in Prague that is absolutely stellar. And to see all these beautiful free minds here attending and all the conversations that we can have is really something. And so, you know, as he said here, with one of the projects that I contribute to is Wasabi Wallet. And that is mainly because over the years I noticed that, well, Bitcoin is a beautiful monetary experiment, or, well, a very successful one, but it is lacking on several very important, vitally important privacy functions. Right? Because here again with the OODA loop, when you can be attributed to your actions, then you can be censored. And that is not good, and we need to fix that. And I do believe that we can fix this with Bitcoin. And I know here, for example, with XMR.2 or many Monero maximalists here in the crowd, you see that as well. Right? You see that there are huge privacy risks with using digital currencies, and that we truly need to fix that. And Monero, well, is definitely a very novel solution, and in my opinion, it's by far the most awesome shitcoin. It still is a shitcoin because, well, it's worse than Bitcoin, and that is me speaking as an economist, right? Austrian economics, monetary good, have huge networks effects, and for me, especially the ability of keeping consensus and staying in consensus, as we did with UASF, is unbelievably powerful. So with me being an economist at first, Bitcoin is absolutely exciting. And then ever since I fell down that rabbit hole, becoming more and more of a cypherpunk privacy extremist, I really need to make sure that we have this monetary tool that is so powerful economically speaking, and that we can use this to further defend ourselves. Not just to defend ourselves against inflation, but against direct theft. And here, of course, privacy is key. So what do we have right now, right? Bitcoin is based on a UTXO model. And that is vitally, vitally important to understand. If you do not understand UTXOs, then it's pretty damn difficult to figure out how to stay private in such a system. And so this means basically you have a coin, a Bitcoin, quite literally. And this coin is scarce, meaning one UTXO, one unspent transaction output, is locked up by a Bitcoin script, right? A legal contract that defines the property rights over who can spend that one single coin. And in most cases, that is simply a public key, right? A huge random or large number that has been derived from the private key over the elliptical curve magic. And with this commitment on who can spend that key, only he who has the knowledge of the private key and can prove that knowledge with a valid cryptographic signature. And this signature part has to be added to the transaction, right? So you have the input, which coin is being spent, and then you have a proof over the person trying to spend that coin, does he actually have knowledge of the private key? And if yes, then this is a spendable output, a spendable input of this transaction. And then the next question is, what to do with that money, right? If you have, let's say, 5 million Satoshis in that UTXO, what happens now? Like the one individual who was able to spend it with knowledge of the private key did spend it, but who is the next one who can spend it, right? And that is the output of the transaction. And here we can have several, right? We can have, let's say, one output that goes to Alice's public key, another output that goes to Bob's public key, and we can have even more elaborate scripts, for example, multi-signatures, or maybe time locks, right? There are many ways that we can define the Bitcoin scripting property rights rule in order to, well, again, define who can spend that new output. And this is basically how the UTXO stat model works. You can spend the entire coin, and only the entire coin, right? Now, it's not an account-based model, like other shitcoins, like Ethereum, for example. By the way, horrible for privacy. And then, you spend the entire coin, and you create new outputs that commit to who can spend that coin, right? And let's say for the very basics, most of the time, we have one input, right, that has one public key committed, and that has the signature or the witness program that proves that you can spend that coin. And then we have another output that is, again, one single public key. And only the person with knowledge of the private key can spend that coin. And in this very basic model, we could say that inputs pay outputs, right? And that is usually how we think of with Bitcoin transactions. You have a coin, you sign your transaction, and then you pay someone else. Maybe you get some change back in a new UTXO. Well, that is true for most cases, but that's not actually how it has to be, right? I would say that this assumption that inputs pay outputs is one of the most devastating privacy leaks that we have. Right? If I have, again, 5 million Satoshi UTXO, and I pay you for the coffee, and I get my change back, there's a clear transaction history that I gave you some money. Right? And that is attribution to an act. And it's very clear, it's very transparent, and everyone verifies it. Literally everyone. I mean, if you're running a full node, by the way, who here is running a full node? Oh, fantastic. The follow-up question, who here is running a nodl specifically? Okay, couple. Okay, that's good. The tribe is growing. Then, everyone here is verifying that the witness program is correct and that the input is actually unspent, and then that the output here is set as well. So this is a full attribution of pretty much the entire economic transaction. And we can kind of obfuscate that with something, for example, like a coin join. And what happens here, there are many different nuances in the implementation. And for example, Wasabi Wallet has one type of these implementation of a zero-link coin join, a Chaumian coin join. And here we collect several inputs by many different individual peers in one giant transaction. And then we have the outputs of these giant transactions with many hundreds of inputs. Then we generate equal value outputs, right? And these equal value outputs are, again, to the public key of the individual who has also provided the input, right? So basically, you send money to yourself, right? You have the input, and you join your coin, quite literally, with all the many other peers in that transaction. And then you generate, in that huge transactions with many, many outputs, one output that, again, belongs to you. And with this, all of a sudden, it's no longer clear exactly which input pays which output, right? because we have many inputs and many outputs, and especially when they are with equal denominations on the output side, it becomes very, very difficult to link these inputs to outputs. Who pays whom? And that is already a fantastic privacy improvement, because now the attribution over who pays whom does no longer exist, or at least to a much more obfuscated way. Right? There are, of course, as always, user errors that you can do that can lead to your de-anonymization, where you can then figure out this was your output, or your UTXO before the coin join, and here after the coin join, this is yours again. For example, if you consolidate a lot of these UTXOs of your coin join. And this is one very powerful technique, and we've been doing coin joins since, what, 2012, 13, probably? And we've gone better and better and better, and for example, with the Chaumian coin joins, we have great privacy improvements in a way that you don't even have to trust the central coordinator of such a huge coin join transaction. Which is awesome, because then this individual who does, or company, who does this coordination of the coin joins cannot steal and cannot spy from you, right? Because he does not know your extended public key, he cannot link your inputs to outputs, and with a bunch of Schnorr blind signature happening here as well. And again, that would be Wasabi Wallet. A bunch more information on that is at docs.wasabiwallet.io. But that is not necessarily the part of this talk here today. Because somewhat of a problem, or the downside of having coin joins, is that you have inputs and the outputs. And you still have one individual paying either himself, in the way that it is set up right now, or we can use some more communication magic, where Alice pays Bob. It's still, though, that the inputs pay the outputs of that one transaction. So here you still know that when Alice is registering her coins in the input section of the CoinJoin transaction, that she does something with these outputs, and most likely they go back to her. Right? So this still decreases our anonymity set, and it locks us within this one transaction. Right? And I think that we can do much better, and we can do so with something called atomic swaps. Now, when I say atomic swaps, most of me look at it's like, oh, shitcoin gambling, right? You change your precious Bitcoin and you get some other random stuff on some other chain. And it's atomically, so nobody can steal from you. Yeah, I mean, cool. That is very nice and novel feature. But honestly, I really don't care much about shitcoins. I really care about my privacy of my Satoshis. And so instead of swapping Bitcoin for shitcoins, what we are swapping is one Bitcoin UTXO for another Bitcoin UTXO. And not within the same transaction, but within different transactions in the time chain. Or, well, after a long conversation with Peter Todd, I should actually say time-space chain, but that's a complete other whole thing. There is a World Crypto Network interview with Peter that we did downstairs in the fishbowl, where we talked a lot about the time-space chain. It definitely is something, so check that out. So the cool thing, though, with atomic swaps here is that we fundamentally break the assumption of chain anal spies that inputs pay outputs. And that is a very major assumption that we are currently all making. And the way that we do it is actually quite novel. Or let's say we can do this stuff already with something called hashed time-locked contracts. Any of you running a Lightning Network node? Fantastic. Then all of you are using hash time lock contracts already to route your payments throughout the Lightning Network. And basically what this functionality does is that you commit to a secret, and you do that by hashing the secret, and then you set up a Bitcoin script spending condition that says that if I reveal the secret, something happens. And then eventually, after you've set up this hash on the time chain, or off chain, you can then reveal the secret and something happens. Right? And this aspect of committing to a secret, doing something with that, and then revealing the secret, that is the basic model of atomic swaps as well. Though the problem specifically with hashed time lock contracts is that we have a hash on the time chain. And this hash can clearly be distinguished from any other public key or signature. And thus this means that we can again attribute that something is happening here, right? It's not just a regular public key and signature, it's a hash and a pre-image. And so there is something going on, maybe a Lightning Network HTLC or an atomic swap. So with using HTLCs, we reveal unnecessary information. And that decreases our anonymity set in the sense that not everyone is using HTLCs. And so when we are using HTLCs, then this reveals that we are part of a smaller group. Thus our anonymity set is smaller. And there has been for a long time now on all the Bitcoin research forums, the discussions about Taproot, which is the implementation of SegWit version 1 Schnorr signature schemes. And that in and of itself is just an upgrade of the SegWit version from the version 0 to version 1, right? Just how awesome SegWit actually is and how it is implemented. And it just changes the signature scheme, right? From using ECDSA to using Schnorr signatures. Schnorr signatures actually came before ECDSA, that was back in 1983 or something. And it's a very simple, very simple signature scheme that uses some cryptographic magic in order to prove knowledge of a private key without actually revealing that private key. That's what a signature does. Well, the Schnorr professor from Munich, kind of an asshole, and he thought that he had ownership over a math formula, so he laid a patent on that, and nobody was allowed to use it. Or if they did, the government would start shooting at them. Satoshi, unfortunately, could not really use this signature scheme when he was creating Bitcoin because, well, nobody was really using it because they were prohibited by violence from using a math formula. Now that the patent is expired, well, the Schnorr asshole is still around, but at least he no longer can enforce his claims. Then now we can use this, actually, to build a more robust system with the signature scheme. So not only do we have cryptographic proof that the signature scheme actually works, and that it is in the discrete log realm, which we do not have a beautiful proof for ECDSA, actually. So we have more risk with ECDSA. But even more than just having a nice proof that this is secure, is that Schnorr signatures are linear, and that we can do a bunch of awesome stuff because they are just so much simpler. It's a simpler Lego block, and we can build more awesome things with simple tools, right? Keep it simple, stupid. And this means that we can do, for example, multi-signatures, not in a way of using the Bitcoin peers to verify that here are 3 public keys, and you need 2 signatures of either of these 3 public keys in order to spend that coin. That is how current multi-signatures work. With Schnorr, we can actually aggregate 3 public keys into 1 public key with some cryptographic magic, and then you can only provide a valid signature to this aggregated public key if you aggregate 2 out of 3 individual signatures of the individual private keys. So we no longer have 3 public keys, but we aggregate them to 1, and we no longer have 2 signatures, but we also aggregate them to 1. So all of a sudden, it looks like 1 single public key, 1 single signature, and again, we would assume that this is just Alice spending her single key coin. However, actually, it's Alice, Bob, and Charlie collaborating together to spend that money for something. And this, again, removes unnecessary information. Right? We don't need to know who is actually signing these transactions. As long as the signature is valid, everything is fine. That's all the full node verifies. And with Music, this is just one of the awesome things that we can do with Taproot. And that is awesome. I wrote my bachelor thesis about this. But what I think is infinitely more awesome is something called adapter signatures that utilizes scriptless script, as is in the title. And what is a script? Well, again, it is a specific set of Bitcoin code that defines the property rights of ownership of a UTXO. And with a scriptless script, we can have some functionalities of scripts without actually utilizing a script. So we're not using, for example, a script of a hash time lock contract. We only use public keys and signatures, but we can have the same effect as an HTLC has. We commit to a secret, we do something with that commitment, and then we reveal the secret and something happens. It's the exact same formula as we already use, again, in Lightning or for atomic swaps already, but in a way that it is indistinguishable from utilizing a regular public key and signature, just by Alice spending her coin on her own. And it's also indistinguishable from Alice, Bob, and Charlie spending their coin together in a 2 of 3 Music. And now, what can we do when we all of a sudden can commit to a secret, do something with that commitment, reveal the secret, and do something with that revelation, without anyone knowing that this is actually happening? It is indistinguishable from any other private public key signature. So, with this, basically, we have a situation where Alice owns a Bitcoin UTXO. let's say 1 million Satoshis in that UTXO. And Bob has another 1 million UTXO Bitcoin that they now want to exchange. It's not that Alice wants to pay Bob. It's not that Bob wants to pay Alice. It's that Alice wants to get the coin of Bob, and Bob wants to get the coin of Alice. So they're kind of exchanging gold coins, basically, right? And we can do this by, well, first starting out with a commitment setup, where Alice sends her coin into a multi-signature script that utilizes adapter signatures, where either Alice and Bob can spend that together, or after a timeout, Alice can get back that coin again to her. So with this knowledge already in this new UTXO being created, in the first setup transaction, Bob knows that he can get access to this coin, but only with the revelation of a secret by Alice. And Bob can verify that. So he knows if I can get that coin if Alice reveals some secret to me. And now that Bob has this proof on the Bitcoin time chain, he can send his coin into another script that is, again, just a public key that says that Alice can get this coin, but only if she reveals her secret. And now, what can both do? Bob cannot spend the first coin alone because he does not yet have the secret. But Alice can spend the coin that Bob just put into that output of the second transaction, but only when revealing the secret that unlocks for Bob that coin in the first transaction. And that is basically then it. Alice can spend that coin, but only by revealing the secret, which means then that Bob can claim the coin of the first transaction. So maybe to recap a bit. We have two transactions on the time chain. The first one is from Alice, a single public key, regular Bitcoin, to this multi-sig scheme that Bob can claim, but only with the knowledge of the secret from Alice. And that is the first setup transaction. Now, from a chain anal spy perspective, it's just Alice's public key spending with the signature into another single public key. Nothing much happening. Just one input, one output, one pub key, one signature. Nothing much. Just like any other regular whole coin sent. Might be a change output as well. And then sometime later, maybe let's say 5,000 blocks later, Bob sends his coin, again, a single public key and signature, into that new script that Alice can claim. And that script is, again, only a public key. And Alice can spend that second transaction output by simply doing a regular signature that reveals, with this adapter signature mathematical trick, the secret that Bob needs in order to claim that first transaction UTXO. And this is here where the title of time traveling the time chain actually comes in, because that is actually what we're happening, right? We have the setup transaction here, and we fund that with Alice's coin. Then sometime later, a couple of blocks, Bob does the same, right? He sends his coin into this UTXO, and ultimately, after a while, can be 5,000 blocks, can be the next halvening, can be until the year 2141. Really doesn't matter. Eventually, Alice will take that second coin. And by her taking that coin, Bob can take the first coin. So Alice has the input of the transaction 1, but she gets the output of the transaction 2. And Bob has the input of transaction 2, but he's time traveling to get the output in transaction 1. And all of a sudden, with this simple trick, we break the assumption that in one transaction, the inputs pay the outputs. And this assumption is broken not just for anyone utilizing scriptless scripts, but for anyone utilizing Taproot. Either a Taproot single key, either a Taproot music, or a Taproot Lightning cooperative close, or a Taproot channel factory opening, or a Taproot state chain funding, or a Taproot eCash funding, or whatever other magic we can do with SegWit version 1 Taproot. Anyone who utilizes the signature scheme all of a sudden has plausible deniability that he could potentially have done an atomic swap. And thus anyone, all of a sudden, is free from the transaction graph of inputs pay outputs. And that is absolutely mind-blowing. Because now we can still verify that there is a solid chain of digital signatures, all the way from the Genesis block or Coinbase transaction to the most recent UTXO. And that chain is not broken. And it's all valid signatures. However, these chains of signatures no longer correspond to chains of ownership of these UTXOs. And all of a sudden, we have plausible deniability of where you are spending your money. Because from the outside, it just looks like you're sending to a public key. It might be yours, it might be your hardware wallet for cold storage or something, or it might be you buying something on Bitrefill or whatever. It really doesn't matter. It could be anything. But actually, this is not even your output that you create. You get that output a couple of thousand blocks later. And with this, we break the biggest privacy problem in Bitcoin. That is that inputs can be linked to outputs. And when we have that, and we will very soon, hopefully, 2 weeks, then I would say we have pretty damn good privacy in Bitcoin. So I've already said like a bunch of stuff, and I'm sure you have many, many questions. So I would like to open this up already to questions. So if you have any, please hand up and ask. So the cool thing though is with this magic, right? It's simpler, it's more secure, we have cryptographic proofs, we have plausible deniability, and we can do much more than just music, or much more than just scriptless scripts. We can do a bunch of things, right? And this is not the magic pill that solves everything, but it's one part of the puzzle piece that builds our huge privacy defense tools in Bitcoin. So, for example, let's assume you have, you went to Coinbase and you completely doxed yourself by showing your government ID, and you begged for permission to stack your sats, right? Which you, by the way, shouldn't. But you did that, and now your coin is tainted with your identity, right? That's not good. You can be attributed to whatever you do with that money. Then you spent that with a single signature into some output. And everyone would assume, oh, you've just spent that KYC coin, and you got that output now. But, well, actually, you did an atomic swap. Not just to another random transaction, but actually to a huge zero-link coin join. So all of a sudden, you have this input right here, and you get this output, which is an equal denomination output amongst hundreds of other outputs that are all the equal denomination. So nobody knows that you actually did that coin join. You just did a single pub key spend. But you did not spend the money to yourself in that one transaction. You spend it to yourself a couple thousand blocks later in that coin join. But then what happens when you spend that coin join output? Right? It's just another single public key and another regular single signature spending into another single public key. Well, but actually, this is another atomic swap. But this time, it funds a Lightning Channel factory, which is a huge coin join opening that provides you access to sending zero-conf transactions over the Lightning Network very privately. And all of a sudden, with 2 transactions, you completely broke the link on the time chain, and now you have access to utilize your coin off-chain without leaving any on-chain footprints. But what do you do with that funding in Lightning? Well, of course, you could do some routing across the network to ultimately then land at a eCash server and well, then use your eCash tokens in order to spend your coffee or whatever. And you do that all without revealing that you actually did it. And there's no attribution that you use a coin join, that you are funding that Lightning Channel factory, or that you're sending to that eCash server. All these assumptions are broken, completely obliterated. And nobody from the outside can attribute these actions to you. Questions so far? Still none?
Okay, I can give you a microphone if you have a question.
Isn't it worse than when I attribute myself to a coin join? I do a transaction that is not known to be a coin join, and that amount ends in somebody's hands eventually. And he does something I don't like with it, and I can be attributed to it because I didn't reveal the coin join. If I did, I would have better position to deny the action, I guess.
Very good point, right? Because you are swapping UTXOs. This means you have your KYC coin over here, and you get your coin join output over there, but Bob gets your KYC coin from the input into his output. And now what does Bob do with this output? Right? If he goes to Silk Road and is active in the Agora of the second realm, then yeah, you might be attributed to his actions. But again, you have plausible deniability, right? This could be you, it could be Bob, it could be Charlie, it could be anyone. And ultimately, does it matter? Like, when we're all just doing coin swaps and we're all doing coin joins, and we all make sure that we have these privacy tools available, it's pretty over. And the cool thing is, you can always, after the fact, prove that you actually do have ownership of that second coin, and that you did partake in this atomic swap and in the coin join, right? You can do that with a signature by just revealing, for example, the adapter of the scheme. Just a random number that you have to leak. You can always do that. You can always claim ownership, and you can always voluntarily opt in to be attributed to this transaction. For example, if Bob goes to Silk Road. But if you don't want to, you don't have to.
Don't you consider that Bitcoin should be private on the core level?
Well, with this it is.
Not... Maybe some things I don't understand 100%, but I still will have some questions afterwards to you.
Please come up, yeah.
So what needs to be changed in Bitcoin to make this possible, and how likely is it to change in your opinion?
Very good question. This is all included in the Taproot SegWit version 1 soft fork proposal. So BIP Taproot defines how exactly we can use these adapter signatures and other tricks to hide a lot of information in one single public key that is indistinguishable from any other regular single public key of Schnorr. Then we have tab script, which defines a new scripting logic that utilizes these cryptographic tricks. And then we have the BIP Schnorr. And this just defines how we use the Schnorr signature scheme and what exact math formula that is. So these are 3 BIPs authored by Peter Woolley and a bunch of other awesome contributors. And we all get that with the Taproot soft fork. Now, how will that look? Well, since I'm the CEO of Bitcoin, and I can clearly tell you that, and the roadmap is 2 weeks. I mean, pretty much everyone who's interested in this sees that Taproot is a all-net benefit improvement to Bitcoin. So it should not be controversial, but so it should have been SegWit. And we fought many years of war in order to get that activated. This brings unbelievable privacy tools to Bitcoin. There are many individuals who do not want you to have privacy. And there will be many individuals who do everything that they possibly can to block that activation of this powerful tool. Well, yeah, they will do that, but what I can claim here is that I will do everything that I can in my power to get Wasabi Wallet Taproot version or SegWit version 1 compatible the day of activation. Because the sooner we start using Taproot v1 pub keys and signatures, the sooner we have the plausible deniability. So I will do everything that I can to get this activated as soon as possible. I for sure will run the code on my own full node, of course, after I've verified it. And when? Well, 2 weeks. How? I don't know. Maybe another UASF. I mean, this time there's no ASIC boost stuff, so miners hopefully don't bother about that so much. There were other soft forks already in Bitcoin that were not as controversial as SegWit was. So we'll see. I don't even think that there is yet discussions on how exactly it should be activated. But it will be a soft fork. It is backwards compatible. It is on the code base rather simple because it's just an incremental update of the SegWit versioning program from version 0 which is currently just the regular SegWit that we use now with ECDSA, to version 1, which will be Taproot. And because just the way that SegWit is designed, this is rather easy to do. Again, nothing in Bitcoin really is easy.
I'm not sure if I understood everything that you said, but does that impact the way that you back up something? So like, for example, in the normal assumption that outputs pay inputs, you have an HD wallet that the master private key just generates all the other stuff. Do you need to keep track also of all the pre-images, or are they generated by the master?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, so you have, so what you use for this adapter, it's just another random number, t, in the math formula. And I would presume that you can use a random number based on the HD scheme, a regularly deterministic wallet scheme. I don't know. I don't know how it will be implemented. But the cool thing is, it's no longer a pre-image and hash, but it is a pub key, or a private key and a pub key. So it's much easier to back up adapters than it is to back up HTLCs. Because you no longer have hashing functions, you just have the key derivation, which we already solved with BIP 40 something. So not sure, very good question. And the thing is, when you have all your private keys, you can easily check which public keys transactions are included. So you see, okay, in this transaction I have my input, and you see that in this transaction the output has my pub key. So you can still prune your full node to check which transactions are yours. But for the backup, I guess it can be done in HD wallet style.
Okay, so does this mean that the Zuko Wilcox we have to buy again on the budget angel again in the supermarkets? So finally, so does it mean that like Zuko Wilcox we have to buy again on the budget angel in the supermarket because he was bragging that he always buys more expensive products, And the second question, does this really finally rid the space from all the scammy shit coins like Zcash, Monero, Dash, and whatever else is there?
Well, to the second question, it's more a monetary phenomena, right? Media of exchange is a non-zero-sum game. So the one with the largest network effect is the winning one, and all the others are losing, game theoretically. So I would believe that there is a tendency towards one single media of exchange that is the most liquid good on the market. And I presumably, as an economist, would say that it's more important to have economic reliability than to have privacy in order to be the most liquid media of exchange. So for me, I'm an economist first, privacy extremist second. And with this, I would tend to say that Taproot and all the other magic tools that we can use give us sufficient enough privacy while still retaining our unbelievable economic soundness of the base monetary protocol. So I would say that something like this is a net win-win. Though ultimately, this is pure anarchy and money. We have Hillebrand open source code running on your own full node. What you run on your own full node is absolutely up to you. And you're an individual with your own unique preferences, and you will run whatever software you choose. So there will not be everyone using Bitcoin. I doubt that. I don't think that it will be good to be at that stage. But ultimately, you always have the choice to use Bitcoin. And now you have the choice to use Bitcoin unbelievably private.
In your examples, you were using like 5,000 blocks in the future, but I'm assuming that these are time locked. So in order to make it a safe swap with someone else, you're going to want to have shorter timeouts, correct? Or?
Yeah, very, very good observation. You always have pre-signed timeout transactions, similar as you do with HTLCs in Lightning Network. And with these, it's a unique trade-off here, because the longer the time lock, the more plausible deniability you have. Right? Because if you say, okay, here's my input, and 2 blocks later, I get my output, then your plausible deniability is rather small. But if it's one halvening, right, then there are many, many billions of transactions happening that all could be potentially yours. So this is trade-offs. It's an implementation choice. Hopefully, we will see many wallets utilizing these schemes so that we can experiment which ones are good. And ultimately, it's user choice. Right? Maybe you just want to do a swap, maybe even within the same block. You could do that too. And it depends.
Do you think that can also be used for doing financial contracts on top of Bitcoin?
Oh yes,
Like rainbow or discrete law contract or something like that?
Precisely. Discrete log contracts is another awesome thing that we can do with Schnorr. We can do, I mean, most of this we can do with ECDSA too, but it's just a hack, because ECDSA is a hack around the Schnorr patent, and Schnorr just makes everything so much simpler. So yes, we can do that already with outpoints, I think, is it called in ECDSA? But with adapter signatures, we can do discrete log contracts and all this that provide a lot of awesome stuff. Yuri, the dude who talked before me, he is actually working on a discrete log system that is very awesome. And that gets a lot easier with Schnorr and Taproot. So we can utilize it, yes. And, you know, scriptability.
Yeah, I had a question, what Martin Habovšek mentioned me, and that with Schnorr signatures, that when we can aggregate signatures, it's much easier to verify them. So the aggregated transactions are actually cheaper. So the fees will be lower when I'm going to do, for example, CoinJoin, which can be pretty expensive now. So actually it will be more expensive to not be anonymous. Am I right?
Yes. So okay, Schnorr is a huge topic, and that's why I always speak of Taproot, because Taproot includes, for example, Music, and Music does public key aggregation and signature aggregation, but with communication. I think there are 3 rounds of communication in order to generate the pub key and the aggregated signature, and we can do that already. That is Music, and that. It's much more efficient to verify 1 pub key and signature than it is to verify 2 of 3 pub keys and signatures with the current multi-sig script. That is actually very inefficient to verify. So that, yes. But what you're saying with Coin... Oh, and another thing is that if we have 1 block and that block contains many individual Taproot pub keys and Taproot signatures, then we can do batch verification. So I'm not exactly sure how the magic works, but we add up all the pub keys, which are just random numbers. We add up all the signatures, which are just random numbers. And then we do 1 pub key signature verification for that 1 aggregated. But that is not happening on the time chain. That is happening on your full node verifying the time chain. So you're more efficient at verifying blocks that use Taproot. And then what you say with coin joins, that will not be included in the Taproot upgrade. Because that is not just bi-communication or bidirectional communication pub key and signature aggregation. This is actually something called cross-input signature aggregation. So you have many different inputs with each spending their unique outpoint, and then you aggregate them all together. You aggregate the signature of each of these hundreds of inputs together to 1 single aggregated signature. And that single aggregated signature then is put into the block of the time chain. So this is a much more broad change, because we would have to introduce new fields on the block headers, and it would change a lot of other stuff in consensus. So it will take much more than 2 weeks to get that implemented. I think it's possible with a soft fork, but it will be a very massive change. And that's the cool thing with Taproot. It's not a big change at all. It's just SegWit version 1. From version 0 to version 1, there's almost no consensus change here. It doesn't barely touch any consensus code. But with cross-input signature aggregation, that is a lot. But what we can do then, for example, Wasabi does coin joins with anonymity set 100 for denomination 0.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.8. So there are many hundreds of inputs and many hundreds of outputs. And because a zero-link coin join is already communicated amongst all these hundreds of peers, we already have many rounds of communication. So then we could, when we have this, communicate 1 extra step so that every peer of that transaction signs the transaction, and then the coordinator aggregates all these signatures. So we have 500 inputs in the transaction, but 1 signature. And the fee for that 1 signature is paid per byte, but all of a sudden we have 500 inputs paying the fee of 1 signature. And this is, for every single input, much cheaper than to pay for the entire signature of that 1 input. So in this case, yes, by default, it is the most private to do coin joins with giant anonymity set. So that will be a massive win for privacy, but more than 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Max, and thank you guys for your questions, but I'm sorry, but we don't have time for more, so...
May I,
Yeah?
one more thing. Like, all this magic, I can barely understand it and wrap my head around it. If you have questions, there is the unbelievably well-documented Elements project that is written by Jonas Nick, who is an absolute hero of Bitcoin privacy and Bitcoin development in general, as well as Andrew Polstra. And so on the Elements project on GitHub, there is a scriptless script repository that has a markdown file with a bunch of different written documentation on the concept of all this. And read that. That is all the math magic is happening in here. And thank you, Jonas, for answering all my many hundred questions. He really is awesome. So thank you to all the Bitcoin privacy researchers and developers. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Max.